hey, I got a compliment to give you, Eric. And that is my brother's currently, doing his thing. He's doing a recomp. He's looking great. He has listened to some of your stuff, some interviews and so forth, like while he eats his a morning breakfast. I have not. But one that he told me, a story that he told me, correct me if this is not true. He said he relayed a story how after your first show, the regain of weight was pretty intense, and where you said, I think your starting point, I'm making up numbers. Let's say you started at like 190, you cut down to 160, and then you got back up to like 200 after that. Is that true? Like, was your regain after the first show that amount?
So I started at 210.
Yes.
210, 215 actually, and then I dieted down. My lowest weight was 178 in 07, my first show.
Yep.
And then within 2 months, I was up to 226.
Yes, that's exactly the story that he...
48 pounds in 2 months. So just a solid... I almost reached my goal of gaining a pound a day, but I didn't quite.
Nice. Nice. What? So out of curiosity, what made you stop at 226? How you looked, how you felt?
No, I think it was the combination of finally regaining some normal hunger signals.
Yep.
Understanding, because this was my first competition season, so I didn't have a bodybuilding lifestyle as far as the way I was eating. I didn't have habits. I was like, I'm going on a diet. So as a skinny kid who liked to lift before that, like my strategy was eat Mexican food. You know? So
Chipotle
combination. No, yeah, well, and actual Mexican food too. So like the combination of not having off-season habits, not having any transitional game plan, and not being at all prepared for the intense hunger, and taking the diet and not doing the diet that well compared to the like diet breaks and more structured refeeds and more food variety that I would have in these days, and just taking longer, set me up for some being in a pretty bad way. So,
really?
Yeah, but it did eventually come back. I just greatly outpaced by about 10 to 15 pounds the amount of fat I actually lost, which is unfortunately not an uncommon thing for first-time competitors.
Yeah, I've never gone on yucky like you, so I don't quite have that perspective, but I do have an experience being on, and I'm not trying to say anything controversial, Eric, don't worry, but on a regressive, I believe it was called ketogenic diet in 2000 and this would be 11, so it was about 8 years ago. I was training. I wanted to get down to a new level of leanness. I had already lost 25 pounds, and so I decided to do this regressive cyclical. I forget basically all it means is you're keto, so you're 70% fat, 30% protein, no carbs, trace carbs for 5 days of the week, and then on another day you're 50% protein, 50% fat, still no carbs, so you're still below 30 grams of carbs. And then 1 day a week it is a refeed, but the refeed is less than 1 gram per pound of body weight of carbohydrates. And so it's 4 weeks. It's a 4-week thing that you follow, but it can be adapted and run several times. Anyways, didn't know what I was doing. All I heard is like, not carbs make you fat, but this, you want to get really lean, try this out. So I decided to do it. By the end of the 3 cycles, so a 12-week block, I had lost, the last, 12 pounds. So I had got down to 150 something, which is the leanest I've been, probably ever. But my relationship with food was terrible at that point. I remember near the end of it, Eric, where I would fantasize about peanut butter and about the boiled egg I was going to have, and I would think about cooking either endless amounts of cabbage, during the parts where I could get carbs, because I'd calculate, wait a second, these carbohydrates, well, let me try and maximize the amount of carbs I can have. Instead of thinking, I want a banana, I want this, I want that, I said, it's not enough volume. So it went from, I would say if I was eating, I'm making up numbers here, pre-diet, 2 pounds of food a day, I don't know, I'm making up numbers here, it's probably 3 pounds, 3.5 pounds, where it's just, and then after it ended, I remember I went with my brother to a buffet. And I ate to the point that I've never eaten before, where I was so uncomfortable. Not only did I feel like throwing up, I don't know how I didn't throw up, but I had meat sweats that night, Eric, where it was at 11 a.m. and then 12 hours later, I still couldn't go to sleep.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And every competitive physique athlete knows exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Been there.
Yeah.
How did you notice your performance was when you were on this low carb?
Terrible. No, terrible. I mean,
Really? Yeah.
I'm not trying to, yeah.
So some people do all right on it, but
Yes.
but some people do terribly.
Yeah, and, actually, here's a question for you, Koth. What are some, without getting into the too nitty gritty, because we're going to have a freewheeling discussion today. This is a solo episode with you and me, where we're going to drop some science, right? Talk a little bit about carbohydrates. Are they necessary around the workout? We also want to talk about how to try and maintain, we're not floating our own boats here, but some integrity in the industry, our experiences with that. But I do want to hop onto what you just said about some people perform well with lower carbohydrates. How do you kind of figure that out besides experimentation? Are there some markers that people can use, or what does that mean? Because for myself personally, I haven't done it enough, but I do feel that with more carbs, I tend to perform better, it seems like.
For sure. So yeah, you noticed on this ketogenic diet, but below 30 grams 6 days a week, that you were performing. Did you find it was right from the start that you were performing poorly, or did it take you getting leaner and being in a deficit for a while?
Yeah,
so like, man, right from the get-go, this things are going poorly.
So it did take me a while, but I did experiment afterwards with a lean mass phase where I was in a surplus plus, but it was quite low carb. But again,
Yeah.
at that point, it seemed to me that my rate of strength gain wasn't as it was before.
Sure. Yeah. So that's actually an interesting phenomenon that is not something you're alone in observing. I think it's funny. We've had, strictly talking about like bodybuilding and powerlifting performance, there's been this kind of evolution over time of the way we talk about ketogenic diets. Not too long ago, I would have been relatively anti-keto. We've come, and the sports nutrition community as a whole would be very pro-carb, which I think rightfully so, given that most real sports are team sports and endurance sports and are much more carb dependent. And if you were to take a marathon runner or a soccer player's carbs away, you would see an immediate decrement in performance. But interestingly enough, there's been like 3 studies in last year that have looked at attempts at keto gaining. And in each of them, we see either a lack of muscle gain or actually a loss of muscle, or the marker for it, either a lean body mass, cross-sectional area, or muscle thickness. Even though performance is maybe roughly maintained, I think that would probably change over the long period. And in some studies, there's a slight loss of performance. So it's probably not the best diet to be that low in carbohydrate. But the interesting thing is, like, you don't have to be that high either to avoid that. Anywhere from like a moderate to a high carbohydrate intake probably works. So I think it's best just to stay away from extremes.
Yeah.
Acutely though, this is pretty interesting. I don't think like the carbs you eat a few hours before training have much of an impact on training.
Boy, that transition, Eric, I respect it, bro. I actually respect it, because we talked, what you guys don't know is we have a little bit of structure, just like, okay, what's going to be the sciencey topic for the day? And that is the sciencey topic. And we were randomly talking about food before, and you did the perfect segue into carbs around training. There was, I don't want to say a myth, let's say it was something that was perpetuated within the lifting community, that carbohydrates around lifting is very important. It will positively affect your performance if you're not, slamming a banana or, some sort of sugary drink, some sort of carbohydrate source around your training. You're not optimizing your training, because that sugar that you use or those carbohydrates will help, in quotations, fuel your workout.
Yep.
Is there any truth to that? What has the evidence shown over time?
Yeah, there's an interesting interplay of theory, anecdote, and limited data on this one. So for one, like mechanistically, the main things related to performance for resistance training has to do with keeping blood glucose levels stable and also having adequate glycogen, right? And then also not having something like central fatigue getting in the way. So, or actual peripheral fatigue as well, but that's much less related to carbohydrate unless you're actually going into it glycogen depleted, although that's going to affect both central and peripheral fatigue. So that sounds all complicated, but essentially what I'm saying is that resistance training doesn't deplete glycogen nearly as much as you think, even if you go through an absolutely trash yourself leg day. Like we're talking like 5 sets of 15 on 3 different exercises, and this has been done on a moderate carbohydrate diet. It doesn't hurt you any more than being on a high carbohydrate diet, which might surprise people. And I've never seen more than a 40% glycogen depletion from bodybuilding training, even of high volume. So there's some safeguards there, and the more you deplete glycogen, you typically see the body pulling from other ways of fueling exercise. And if you look at a study after someone has done resistance training, you'll see a depletion of intramuscular triglyceride in addition to glycogen. It's not that you're actually using the fat to fuel the reps, but during all the rest periods and to recycle ATP and to keep your energy systems rolling, that's a big part of it. So that's something to consider. So while it is glucose and glycogen dependent, for one, low carbohydrate diets don't deplete glycogen as much as we think. Our body finds other ways to maintain glycogen levels because it's so important for our survival. And 2, the training itself on this kind of very low end of the spectrum as far as total volume of work compared to all athletes is not that glycogen depleting in the first place, nor is it incredibly carb dependent. But there are sensing mechanisms in the body that have a little less to do with glycogen and the total amount of carbs in a meal that are carb dependent. So, for example, if you look at some of the meta-analytic data and the reviews on carbohydrate and resistance training performance, there isn't a clear relationship between eating carbs before training and performing, but there certainly isn't a clear, like, it doesn't matter. It's just variable.
Yeah.
And this matches the anecdote. Some people are like, yeah, if I don't have carbs before training, I just don't have that fifth gear. And other people are like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I can train fasted. I'm all good. And there is a cool study that came out last year where they looked at carbohydrate mouth rinsing and its effect on resistance training performance. And this is where we get a little idea of what might be going on here. So this is cool. So they tracked the total volume done in a resistance training session, and they gave one group a artificial sweetened drink that they rinsed in their mouth and spit out mid-workout, and then the other group they gave an actual carbohydrate-containing drink. Now they swallowed none of it, so neither group actually got carbohydrate. However, and they both got sweetness, so it's not just simply the flavor and the brain sensing, because there's been a number of hypotheses, like why in some studies does carbohydrate mouth rinsing work? And people have speculated that it's your brain sensing sweetness, right? That's the response, and that might be part of it. But in this study, and it's not the only finding we found, studies have been kind of going back and forth on this. We've seen that. See, artificial sweeteners. We have seen that the effects.
We're endorsed by the Coca-Cola brothers.
Yes, exactly. So that's why we said keeping some integrity.
Yeah,
so we'll
some.
talk about that later.
We'll talk about Dubai later, but yeah.
Yeah, you still got to make that money. Yeah, so.
No, but you're saying that's perfect. Okay, so the hypothesis was maybe that the sweetness when it hits your lips, there's some signal in your brain that then it's a cascading effect. But they made artificial sweeteners, so that was not a factor. Both tasted sweet. Right.
So if it does play a role, it probably isn't the only mechanism. There is actually detectors for carbohydrate in your mouth. You know, and we do actually start breaking down carbohydrate. There is amylase in saliva, right? That's the enzyme that starts to break down carbohydrates. So there is probably specific carbohydrate sensing mechanisms in the mouth, and when it is sensed, that helps you release maybe blood glucose or inhibits central fatigue. And basically allows you to perform better. So this is a useful tool if you're on a diet. Like, I can't take anything more and I'm starting to feel fatigue from my diet. And you can at least try just to have a Gatorade, bring it to you in the gym and just rinse your mouth with it and spit it out. Yep. You'll make everyone in the gym think that water basin is unusable and gross. But at least you will have got a few more reps, and screw the rest of the gym because you're trying to get ready for the stage, right?
Especially if you
That's what I endorse.
Yeah, you got to do whatever it takes. Look, we should have a whole segment, Eric, called War Stories that are just from like people that have prepared for shows or just things like that. The things that people do, which I think would be funny to talk about. A quick side story. This is different, but kind of similar. There was someone that prepared, not going to say his name to keep him anonymous, but he's preparing for a show called the Canada Cup here in Canada that apparently is a big deal. He was dieting down. He was dieting heavy. He was, I think, 20 weeks into his prep. He was getting quite lean, but it reached the point where he couldn't resist the food. But what he decided to do was get some cheeseburgers, chew it up in his mouth, and then spit it out. And he said that was his. He said, if I had to give one secret to my Canada Cup win, it would be chewing cheeseburgers and then spitting them out. And I said, that sounds horrifying. It sounds like an unhealthy relationship with food. I'm gonna go now, but that was me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like for most people that would make it worse, because then each time you have to make the decision to not like swallow.
I'm just like,
it sounds awful.
Yeah, it's like I'm gonna resist temptation, and then you're just bringing it closer to I'm gonna resist temptation. I'm like that.
Yeah, that's like food porn to the nth degree.
Yes. Yeah,
it's like the guy who's like, I don't cheat on my wife, I just go to the strip club. It's like, all right.
Yeah.
And then that's like one step further than I don't cheat on my wife, I watch porn. It's like, okay, like whatever's cool with your relationship, whatever boundaries you have. The next guy's like, I don't cheat on my wife, I just have sex and then pull out before I ejaculate. And it's like,
wow.
Whoa. I think that is still cheating. Like,
that is definitely. Yeah, it's like we all have there's emotional cheating. There's emotional, break. So he just needed that connection with the food. It wasn't digesting it. It was just it in his mouth. So,
but like you said, even though he's not actually getting the calories able to get on stage, the relationship with food probably suffered due to that behavior.
Oh, no.
Much like the pulling out method would still have your relationship suffer in a marriage. So, pro tip, ladies and gents.
Keep it in. Nope.
Yeah. Don't use that method. That is still cheating.
Yeah.
You heard it here on the Iron Culture podcast.
This is,
to wrap it all up on carbohydrate.
To wrap it all up, Eric, go on.
The obvious segue between what we were just talking about is that it takes a long time for glycogen to actually incorporate and seat. So you eating 30, 40, 50 grams of carbohydrate an hour out, 2 hours out from training, it's probably not going to meaningfully affect your glycogen levels. Blood glucose stabilization doesn't require much carbohydrate anyway. However, there are some mechanisms that might affect fatigue in the brain, which could have downstream effects on volume. And we've probably found out that's the case because of the few, but not all, carbohydrate mouth rinsing studies that have positively impacted training volume. So for you, the listener, experiment with different sized carbohydrate meals prior to training within 1 to 2 hours. There's probably a sweet spot where you don't have much gastrointestinal distress. The old adage used to be eat as much as possible and see what you can get away with. I think that's probably not good. It's more like eat that kind of sweet spot, no pun intended. And then if you are actually dieting and you don't have the carbohydrates to do that and you are finding you're quote-unquote bonking in the middle of a training session, at least give carbohydrate mouth rinsing a shot, see if you notice a difference. It may or may not work, but it is a potential tool in the toolbox.
I don't know if anyone can hear the sirens in the back of Eric's side, but I just heard in the back of my head, as soon as the sirens start, you're now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Is what I just heard. I just heard where the siren distantly in the background,
Nice. So I guess now I won't edit that out on my side since we're recording the audio.
Oh,
that's
Cody,
fine.
keep it raw, okay? Not to make
raw. Okay.
We're keeping it professional here. I was going to say, Eric, what do you think about the concept of developing a positive association with carbohydrates, where I know a lot of bros, and again, this could just be anecdote, there's some association in their brain between them consuming carbs with their training and it having a positive impact on it, where it started years ago. I think some YouTubers, some influencers started doing it where they'd buy sugar candy, so sour watermelon, sour peaches, Sour Patch Kids, just some sort of candy that's basically all carbohydrate, and they would consume it while working out. And this actually is quite common. Like I go to my gym probably during peak hours, there's a handful of people eating carbohydrates while training. Could it be what they're associating? Once again, it's like it tastes good inside my mouth. I enjoy it. It gives me a positive reaction. The mindset of me being here, then the association is kind of that experience that you have, kind of like using our analogy here, a cigarette after sex.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, I think that could very well be a real thing. And like I said, there's two proposed mechanisms. They probably both play a role. One is the actual positive association from the sweet sensing center of our brain, and the other is the actual carbohydrate sensing. So whether you spit out Gatorade or you actually eat gummy worms and swallow it, you're going to get the same effects of both. So,
right.
Yeah, spit or swallow, you will find that any potential positive effects would occur.
What?
Yeah,
Eric, here's what I feel, man. I feel like you're my little angel, where you're this, this image in the industry where it's like you're the guy, you're this Captain America. Look at you. You look like Steve Rogers with that facial hair, and here I am bringing you down like Lucifer with the temptation. Paradise Lost style, John Milton, where it's that temptation, and it's like, I just wanted to talk about carbohydrates today, Omar, and now we're talking about infidelity. I'm like, I'm sorry, Eric. I don't know how I came to this.
I'm never going to come back from this, Omar.
Wow. Well, that's why you have integrity in this industry and I don't. And for the segues to the topic today, I think what's interesting doing this podcast with you is that we've been fortunate in terms of who we've been dealing with, where you kind of said that line, Eric, which I like that line. It's like, I'm your favorite MC's favorite MC. We're some of the people that we've already had.
Shout out Idea, rest in peace, 2011.
Wow. Okay. See, you're gonna get a dose of hip hop with every episode. I like it.
Maybe.
I like it.
No guarantees.
No. There are no guarantees here, other than you'll do some intense soul searching. We've had people like, I would say John Kiley, when we had him on for the talk on periodization. Not like humble to a fault, and I don't mean that offensively, but what I mean is, here's a guy where some of the knowledge, some of the data these individuals collect, and I think maybe, I don't want to speak for him, Mike Zordos, who we had on, there was someone at that Florida University, some sort of research where people can use what they have, what they've studied, their new knowledge, to either try and make themselves a guru, try and make themselves an expert, sell it, for profit in a way that might be a little nefarious. But then you have guys like this John Kiley, where he's studying all this periodization. Is it relevant to pretty much every sport? Yeah. Like, can he try and leverage this in a big way to position himself as an authority? All those things, Eric, but they don't. And so you're someone that I have looked up to when it comes to the conduct, except on the bodybuilding forums. Okay. I felt that you could be a little too rude sometimes, but that's okay. Maybe I was
I'd like to think I've come a long way from when I was that age.
From when I was 13 years old, Omar. You're like, actually, I was 28, but I'm still saying.
Yeah, I mean, 2009 wasn't that long ago. So.
No, but how you've conducted yourself, I think it's something that doesn't get talked about often enough. And I think because from my perspective, being more on the, I hate the word influencer, but the social media side, where you're trying to reach a mass audience, you see how easy it is for people to, try and say the right things. But then as soon as there's some sort of endorsement or offer of money, the tune kind of switches. They go from talking about an evidence-based approach or trying to give good information to their viewers to saying, like, buy this detox tea, which I have in fact seen. So integrity in the industry is important. Who you surround yourself with. The people that we've already had on the podcast demonstrated this. You, Eric, are someone, to me, who demonstrates it. What's that little switch in your head? Why haven't you shilled for the Coca-Cola brothers yet? Okay, why haven't I seen you on a box of Wheaties? Why aren't you telling me that meat's the answer?
Well, meat is the answer.
Meat is the answer. The flesh is weak.
That's right. So you have to eat more.
Yes.
To offset it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, the I can't speak for anyone else, but I'm certainly not alone in being someone who sticks to their own beliefs and doesn't change it for. They don't modify their beliefs or their message based on something that comes along. I obviously will change my mind, but that's not the same thing, right? So what we're talking about here is quote unquote selling out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason why that is not attractive to me and why I don't think I do it is because it doesn't line up with the whole reason I'm out there.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this to try to be more popular or to get my notoriety out there. There probably was a time when that would have been it for me, and when I was younger and a little more insecure, and I didn't have the kind of self-belief and self-love to where I would supplant that with social media. And it's probably just a good thing that when I was 23, there wasn't Instagram.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the reason why I don't is because anytime I have to shift like that and pivot and then endorse something that isn't quite in line with my goals, it is a betrayal of my mission statement, or it's at least hitting pause on me working towards it. And I am fortunate that we created the 3D Muscle Journey mission statement way back when in 2009, 10 years ago. And that is the rubric which by I make every decision. So is this going to help me in my mission? No matter how attractive that opportunity is, if it doesn't actually serve the mission statement, the answer is no, regardless of what kind of monetary reward there might be. And that's also just because I'm not really motivated by money.
Don't take my line, Eric.
I am not motivated by cash.
But cash money, baby.
Yeah. I very much appreciate the fact that I'm in a point in my career where I don't have to live check to check. But once I got past that point, and I didn't have to quote unquote worry about money, that's where it stopped becoming something I was like focused on. And data actually supports that once you get out of the position of poverty, once you're on like the median household income in the U.S., that's where money stops being correlated with happiness, where you're no longer scraping to get by. Like if you don't have to worry about things, if you can live your life, if you have all the needs a human has, what's it matter? And so to me, whether someone said, hey, do you want this $100,000 deal or $1 million deal or $1 billion deal, they're all kind of the same.
Yeah.
So that's just my perspective, but I think that's why I'm fortunate in just my makeup and kind of the path I was put on more than 10 years ago, that I think it's easy for me not to betray my integrity. I don't have those temptations in the same way I might if I was less clear on my goals.
Now, if someone gives you a burger, on the other hand, where you're 2 weeks out from your show, that temptation, Eric.
2 weeks out, no chance.
Damn.
1 week after, absolutely a problem.
Yeah, 100% a problem. I was going to say that, to quote the one and only Gordon Gekko, have you watched the movie Wall Street?
The Wolf of Wall Street?
No, Wall Street. No, Wall Street, baby. With Michael Douglas. Okay, Oliver Stone. It's a 1980s. I think it's 1987 or 88. Fantastic movie. I recommend everyone watch. It's kind of about the temporary collapse that happened, I think, in 1987. But the whole kind of mindset of greed is good. So Gordon Gekko says greed is good. But when you say the data supports the idea that once you make a certain amount of money, there's less of an incentive. I've always felt that. I've felt that in a few different ways. And what I mean when I say that, when I started off as a trainer, just developing those experiences, training a bunch of clients, a lot of the clients that I train, because you're charging a certain amount per hour, you have to have a certain amount of wealth, right? We're talking $75 an hour, $80, $90 an hour, 3 sessions a week. So we're talking at least $1,000 a month, You're
not training college students.
No. Yeah. So the clientele would be doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, successful business people, politicians, some TV hosts, like things like that. Okay, so that's the type of clientele. And a lot of them were really unhappy with themselves, their body, the way their life has gone, how they've let their passion slip. And it kind of reinforced the notion to me that money or success as we define it, it's not everything. The career that you choose is the impact maybe that you have, where probably the biggest recurring missed dream for all these people is like, I wish I was either an artist, or I wish I pursued something creatively, or some other passion. Let's say someone wanted to be a chef but decided to become a lawyer, where there's the financial consideration, where this is a guaranteed job. If I put in the time and effort to be a lawyer, I'll make X amount of salary. Whereas the chef, it's like, who knows what restaurant. So I was trading dollars for my time or for my passion. And that was a recurring theme with so many clients over a 2-year period. But in addition to that, I would say the biggest influence for me to try, I say try because I definitely mess up all the time, and I am not someone that is perfect or even close to it. But I'd say a big inspiration for me growing up was actually my mom, because she is 100% just a principled person, is what I'd say. Whereas there's people like, if there was like $100,000 on the ground, like my mom wouldn't pick it up. That's just her. She's just someone like that. So the way she conducted herself made it clear that certain standards that you might have, and that in the end, having money from me seeing those clients who were wealthy, and it really make them that happy. me starting out, where actually I enjoyed that initial hustle being a trainer and how I was making $17 an hour. It was the act of training people that I enjoyed the most. And so the financial consideration, I could go from $17 an hour to $25 an hour, wasn't a huge change for me as long as I had my basic necessities. And fortunately in my life, I've had those basic necessities. So the impetus to try and earn a lot more has never been there. The biggest satisfaction to keep that existential dread away from us has been the things that we do, the things that we contribute, and then the impact that we have. So I like to impact individuals. I think that might be the motivation why I chose more a mass appeal route, is I don't have the level of knowledge to really get in the nitty gritty and affect, the people on a higher level. It's like, but I can teach, the masses a thing or two about the squat. And so it's been an aim to do that. It's hard though. I gotta say, I could do a better job. Like even things like clickbait, when people talk about selling out or, what you promote. I've never promoted anything I haven't believed in, but I see that slippery slope where there is someone called, and it's not worth getting into, Eric, for us, but a news source on YouTube, a guy by the name of Philip DeFranco. I believe he was in a BetterHelp controversy where there's an endorsement that he took that really it may not have been reliable, where it's talking about mental health, but just the impact of, as content creators, what we choose to do, what we choose to represent, what we choose to talk about, how it influences all these people that are watching our stuff. So it's a fine balance. It's extremely hard to do. I'm not saying I have it at all, but I look towards people like you for inspiration when I want, like, people have that natty daddy physiques where they're trying to look at it. It's like, I want to look like that, I want to do this. And then there's people, it's like, hey, I want a career like that. And I would say for myself, I want to try and emulate a career like the one that you've had. So I think it's important to have those people to look up to in the industry.
Well, speaking of, well, first, thank you. But speaking of kind of humble to a fault, going back to your comment about John Kiley.
Yeah. And
again, I mean that you're Canadian, so I know that's a compliment for him.
Yes.
I think you are sometimes as well, because in many ways I have it easier than someone who is taking a more mass appeal approach.
Oh, we're not about to do this. We're not about to do a humble battle, are we, Eric?
We're gonna.
No,
no, but in all seriousness, let me just say this. Yeah. I think being in a position where your content is more likely to get you a lot of followers, like you're saying, right, I'm going to help anybody who lifts, and that's something that is actually secondary to my primary mission. Like my first like people I'm trying to help, and who will always be the first people I'm trying to help, are strength athletes and bodybuilders, because I have a personal connection with them and I understand that experience, and I know for those of us who just love it, we can't stay away from the platform or the stage, and there's always that relationship, and it can be negative. So that's why I'm always trying to, the sustainable performance is my thing, and I mean that holistically, mind, body. So for me, it's a little easier to have a purist message and speak to that audience. And if I was going, right, how do I appeal to someone who's not like me, or who's not in my group, or I don't have a lot of experience with, or how do I appeal to the broad lifter? I would be thinking, all right, so how do I balance the scales on something that might be a little clickbaity, but will get them to listen, but then will actually help them? Yeah. And I think that's a balance that you walk really well. I think it was cool that you acknowledge that sometimes you don't do it. You look back in retrospect and go, oh, maybe I should have changed that title, or that maybe that was one too many shirtless pictures, etc. Yeah. But that's something I have to consider a whole lot less, and I kind of, and there's a downside to that as well. I have less followers than you.
And that is validation, and validation is everything in our lives.
Well, that goes back to another point I wanted to make, that I think in Western society, we often get achievement confused for meaning.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So what brings people happiness and what makes us feel like life matters is, unsurprisingly, finding meaning in what we do. And achievement is only part of that. I do think we have to feel self-fulfilled. We have to do something we're passionate about. We have to feel like we're at our best. Like if we look at self-determination theory, we have to have a sense of competence and we have to have a sense of autonomy. Those are like 2/3 of it. But the other third is that sense of community. And I think that's something that is not really necessarily emphasized in achievement. The recognition of peers is there. Like, I need you to see me being successful. But that's not the same thing as a shared experience and community, which has been shown to be a very important part of making meaning. And I think that's, like, I'm all for meritocracy. I love the idea of pushing yourself and taking it as far as you can. But I think if there is no element of it, or no encouragement, or no intentionality towards using that to make the world better, or connecting with others, probably is the more important, which I do think makes the world better, then it will always be a little bit hollow. And I saw the same thing when I was a young personal trainer. I worked in a studio. We charged similar rates that you were talking about. So I was always working with people who were like 3 income brackets above mine at the time.
Yep.
And they weren't always necessarily happy, but the ones who were doing things where they felt they're making meaning. So I totally agree with you. And this is a kind of a cool little teaser. I think, and I want to ask you a question, Omar.
Shoot.
Do you feel like you have to walk that line and figure out what's clickbait, what's not, and how far can I push this? Because for a long time, I had this perception that science and good quality evidence and like really what works, consistency, hard work, effort, and thinking a little deeper about things is just not sexy, and it's very difficult to market.
Yeah.
Do you? That was something that I believed very firmly, but that has been shattered. Yeah. As in recent years, we've seen the evidence-based community do a lot better job with marketing and becoming popular. So we're excited that we're going to have Jeff Nippert and Greg Nuckols on later to talk about that.
Yes.
So that'll be a future episode. So it's a little teaser, but yeah, would you say that is the source of the struggle for you?
Yeah, because Ideally, the way it would operate, I feel, is that we wouldn't have to rely upon the clickbait. And what are we defining, guys, when we say clickbait? What does that mean? It means you're putting a suggestive title that makes people want to click on the video. So when you upload on YouTube, or the equivalent on Instagram would be like a booty shot, right? Where on Instagram, it's a visual medium, so it's photos. You post a booty shot, and then in the description, you talk about your journey or struggle with self-love, as an example. So the photo gets people to click on that post, and then the booty is what motivates people to read then the caption. So in a way, it's kind of clickbait. On YouTube, an example would be, if you're vlogging, so you're doing a video log of your journey, and I'm just defining everything to make sure everyone's like up there with us, is so a video log. If you're doing something and let's say you're crossing the road and the light changed, and actually you had to run across the last second, right at the last second before cars started moving.
And just real quick, a road is where cars go, and then the lights they tell you when you can and can't go. But a road is on the same page.
A road is anywhere that you're traveling, actually. But okay, we'll go.
I like that you took the road less traveled for that one. That was good.
That's such an Eric joke. So you're crossing the road. You almost, in quotations, almost get hit. You don't. But then you title the video, "I almost died," right? And so the title is an extreme exaggeration of what occurred in the video. So that's clickbait. But how do you manage clickbait where you're trying to then balance the concept that, hey, if I make this video so people want to click on it, but I impart really good information. So it's an informative video. Let's say I want to talk about ankle dorsiflexion. And instead of, just titling it "How to Improve Ankle Dorsiflexion," you title it "Stop, Do This Before You Squat." Someone's like, "What the hell? Like, what do I have to do before I squat?" Because now it's a little bit of intrigue. It is a fine balance, and I think it's clickbait depends upon the payoff, is what I say. What I've personally realized, or when I tend to use it, or when I think it'd be worthwhile. Sometimes what I do, I like to subvert expectations. So when I dressed up as the Green Ranger and did a deadlift, I think I made the title like I got kicked out of the gym, and so people clicked on it, and then it was completely different than what they're expecting, but in a positive way. And two people that do a really good job of that, and what they don't realize, the audience, Alan Thrall is someone, I do like his content. His titles of his videos, except for one that everyone hated him for, where he said, "I got a haircut," and in the thumbnail was him, he has long hair, in the thumbnail was him with long hair, and then him with shorter hair. The shorter hair was him 10 years prior. It wasn't a recent photo, and when he got a haircut, he only trimmed it a little bit. So yeah, it was clickbait. But in general, him and then Jeff Nippard deciding when to use it. Jeff is someone that's really good where if we could even extend clickbait to thumbnails, where thumbnails people will use very alluring images. So let's say we're talking about glutes. A fine piece of glutes, okay, a fine pair of glutes. You're not using C grade glutes, B grade glutes. You're using glutes that are gonna catch someone's eye. So you're trying to make it as visually appealing as possible. And the goal is not to degrade the actual message, but where Jeff does a good job, Alan does a good job, some of these content creators, is that the titles are lucrative, the thumbnails are lucrative, so the image that you see before you click on the video, but the payoff is there. And so I think when clickbait gets bad or when it gets questionable is when you use it essentially, once again, just for views, where there's nothing that the person's learning as a result of clicking on that video. The way I would liken, for me personally, clickbait or forms of clickbait when it comes to actually stellar content would kind of be like cough medicine to get over a cold for people, where it's like, you know what, the taste sucks and we wish it didn't taste like this. We're going to try and mask it with a little bit of better flavor, but you need to take this. This video will benefit you. So in fact, you need to take this cough medicine. So it's kind of an unfortunate necessity to reach the masses. And there's the Jeff Nippard style, but then Greg Nuckols talking about the written word, where he created people like, don't do blogs or whatever, blogs are dead. And then he's like, you know what, I'm going to go 3 times as in detail compared to anyone else before, have definitive articles, the most amount of information that's been put out on a mass scale, and it's going to do better than ever. So I think it depends upon your niche. I think social media really rewards in way stellar content. So we have the Justin Biebers of the world, but then we also have, I like bass, I like jazz, someone called Esperanza Spalding, who has risen to new heights by her technical excellence with her instrument. So I think people like Greg and Jeff can excel and can use clickbait successfully. It is always a fine balance, though, where I've been bitten by it. Me using titles, Eric, where in retrospect I'm like, that kind of sucked. Or Jeff, he made a vlog. I remember he got some flack for it. And I'm like, in my mind, I think it's no big deal, but I understand the viewer for sure. Where I think he said it was just titled "Bad News," so everyone clicks on it, and it's him and his girlfriend, and they lost their luggage at the airport. Now, is that bad news? To them, it is bad news. But when you put a title like "Bad News," I think they're expecting something far more extreme. So it's a fine balance, and it's something that, to quote, you're gonna say, Eric.
Yeah, but that makes sense to why that might have not done well. Because, like you said, as I'm understanding it, if there's payoff, if someone gets value from the video, they're like, okay, sure, you got me in the door, and now I appreciate it. You did. No. But if all I learned was something about you, like you lost your luggage, that's definitely not the norm for Jeff. Like,
no, and that's rare exception.
Absolutely not. But but I can understand how the mindset goes like this, and this was the whole shift that actually got me on Instagram and trying legitimately for marketing and learning about it was that I stopped looking at a platform and Instagram is sleazy or just feeling like I'm just being self-indulgent or narcissistic, and I went, right, what's my goal? To help people. How do I help people if I'm talking to no one?
Yes.
Oh, duh. That seems so simple, but I think it's easy to go, right, anything I can do to build my platform is a plus. But really, I think that's where you're more likely to make a mistake. It's more like everything I do to build my platform should respect my platform, which is about value.
Yes.
Right? So, I might use clickbait, but like you said, that video has to have payoff. I shouldn't go for the cheap, easy ways of potentially blowing up a little bit faster because those blow-ups will also have that second side of that sword, the double-edged sword aspect. And I can imagine that's, especially with the volume of content that you're expected to put out. I mean, we were talking just via Instagram with some things that are going on with your business, where the frequency of videos that you have to do is to be considered like the standard for YouTube. It's not 2 or 3 videos a week. It's more than that, right? It's almost daily content.
Yes.
And that is by no means something easy to do. Just to put that in perspective, so for monthly applications in Strength Sport for mass, our research review, I do 2 written articles, and then I do a video each month, as does Mike Zerdos, and then Greg, because he's just a master of the pen, he does all three his written articles. And the written articles are a lot easier because we're reacting to something. An article comes out, and I go, let me tell you what this means. Just like that mouth rinsing,
Yep.
we covered that in mass. Mike wrote about it. That's easy. Each month we look, we figured out these are the cool ones that are related to our audience. I'll review them. The videos are broader concepts, and I struggle to make one video each month because I have to create that. So I'm very impressed, even by even though it's not the same kind of depth or type of content, of just creating something almost daily on YouTube. That is really takes a certain level of talent, and I can understand how each time there's a temptation to be like, well, shit, I got to get something out on Friday. Sure, I lost my luggage.
Yeah.
Like, that's bound to happen. You know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
My short solution for that one, Eric, just keep putting out the same video with different titles. is I think what it is with the platform of YouTube, there is the expectation with the algorithm. It rewards either more frequent content or content that has a higher watch time. It's a complex algorithm, but basically it does favor more frequent uploads. And so the question, when you said that about what is your mission statement, why be on Instagram, you see that utility. I think you have a level of self-awareness that a lot of people need to try and achieve, or a level of introspection where you can answer questions honestly. And so one of them, I'd say, for anyone out there looking to get in the industry, and let's face it, when I say looking to get in the industry, everyone listening here right now probably has an Instagram. I'm going to guess 90% of you. I'm going to guess a good portion of that probably posts a little bit about their lifting. Some might have some sort of aspirations within the industry. I'm not saying that they want to become a professor or that they want to start a podcast, but maybe one day they work as a trainer, or maybe they want to compete as be a competitive athlete, but how to manage brand endorsements and all those things. I think one of the key elements is to always be honest with themselves, right? Where for myself, do I enjoy being on a large platform? It's fun. I enjoy interacting with it. Is there some level of validation that we must recognize? Absolutely. So I think it kind of becomes the dude that starts fantasizing about chewing burgers when you deprive yourself or convince yourself of a certain narrative, where I have seen that before, Eric, where it's almost the person that's completely abstinent, to use once again our sex analogies, that then it builds up so much repressed feelings or thoughts that then when it comes time for those temptations, so when they do a massive following, like, I'm going to do this right, it's like an F you to the industry, I want to take no money. I've seen individuals like that, Eric, and then 3 years later, they become strong. They have 100,000 people on Instagram, and they're talking about CBD oil. Not hating on CBD oil. I'm saying it's an endorsement that they never would have made 3 years ago. So I think just being realistic with your expectations, your intentions, and then what you plan on doing, and then hopefully aim upwards. And that's what I'd say is I start with low expectations of myself, and every year I was like, if I could just get a little bit better. So let's say I'm a 2 out of 10 right now. I want to get to 3 out of 10, a 4 out of 10 is better than starting with that almost a perfectionist mindset of being like a 10 out of 10 in the integrity scale.
I think you've got some really good take-homes there. Like, one of the ones I really liked that resonated with me was you were talking about being aware of the fact that you are getting some validation out of this. You are, like, it feels good to have followers. It validates you, and we all have elements of insecurity. We all have an ego. Yeah. And something that I think I do well, and I'm willing to just put this out there, is that I'm aware that part of me wants to be the man. Like, I know everything. I'm the guy who can help you. And instead of, like, the easy reaction is to go, that doesn't align with my values. That's not me. That's shitty, and just try to repress it, like you were saying. But I don't think that does a service to it. That is a part of my driver. Like, I for better or worse, whether I didn't get enough attention or the right kind of attention at some point in my life, but I do appreciate the recognition of others. And when I get likes on a video or it gets viewed a lot, I'm like, yes, I did something well. And part of that's because I know I'm helping more people, but part of that's just because I got an ego. Yeah. And instead of pretending I don't or trying to repress it, being aware of that kind of, dark side, if you will, or just element of my personality and who I am, and using that to drive me forward, but not using it to drive right?
Yeah.
That's not in the driver's seat. It's fuel in my gas tank a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think being aware of your dark side and not pretending you don't see it. Like, I'm going to keep you in the corner. Well, if you're not looking at it, how do you know it's in the corner? How do you know it hasn't crept up to the forefront?
Yes.
And I've unfortunately seen people I had a ton of respect for let their ego drive them forward, and it becomes a hidden bias because they don't want to look at their ego. They don't want to acknowledge that this is something that has become this looming monster, and it has corrupted their content. It's corrupted their decision making.
Yes.
And it's bit them in the butt, unfortunately. So I think the three take-homes that we've talked about that I think are really valuable is, one, have a mission statement early on. Know where you're trying to get to. Use that as your litmus test for all decisions. And if it doesn't line up, no matter how quote-unquote lucrative or quote-unquote good an opportunity is, if it doesn't line up with your goals, it's not an opportunity. It's not taking the direction you want to go. And then two, be aware of your ego. Use it as fuel, but not put it in the driver's seat. And then, like you said, you can use these marketing strategies that are designed to get maximum viewership, but always deliver.
Yeah.
Like,
over deliver. Yeah,
absolutely. The value has to be there. And I think if you can do those three things, you, like you said, and you're also humble, self-aware, and you strive to just improve by single steps, each year, like you were saying, I think that's the ticket towards getting as close as you can to maintaining integrity. So,
wow. Eric, you nailed that summary, and that's why it's always enjoyable to have a conversation with you. Let me try and give the apathetic pitch to those that listen to everything that we said about trying to keep integrity in the industry, and they're like, yeah, but money though, cash money rules everything around me, baby. Let me give the quick, honestly, practical breakdown of why keeping integrity, I think, works for a long-term career. And it would just be about managing your own expectations, your viewers' expectations, and how they regard you when it comes to authority, trust, brand identity, and all those sorts of things. And what I mean is that there's basically no one in the industry that's been around for 10 years, 20, 30 years and has continued to prosper, influence people, and make a positive impact that has sold out, in quotations. When we say sold out, it means make a questionable choice that might immediately yield some financial return. So I'll give you an example right now, and I have no problem calling this person out, where there's someone called Mike Chang. Six Pack Shortcuts was the channel. They never were trustworthy, but let's say maybe on the scale of integrity, they were higher up when they started. But there's a few pivots they made that were incredibly questionable. One was something called the Magic Red drink, where we just knew intuitively, and it's called the Magic Red. Why are we gonna buy this thing? It jumps the shark, that Fonzie reference from Happy Days, where there's no shred of integrity left. And if you do that short-term jumping of the shark in order to cash in on your followers, it's gonna burn them, and then you're not going to be able to build a sustainable business where people come year after year, come back to you, try and learn more information from you, get coaching, whatever. So it's short-sighted, in my opinion, cashing in on your integrity if you want to make a career out of this or in any field. So to try and give the apathetic pitch, I think it makes longer-term financial sense to try and keep some shred of integrity and personal conduct when you work in some industry, any industry, really.
Yeah, 100%. Besides, like, the obvious moral implications of maintaining your integrity.
Yes.
Like, we're not selling, like if I'm talking to the sociopaths out there who are like, explain to me how this won't benefit me,
explain why feelings matter.
Right, yeah, like, we're not selling shoes. You're not some salesman who's going to see this person once. You sell them an overpriced shoe that...
Well, I do actually, Eric, now.
Position shoes are good, though. But, you're not selling a product, right? Yes. A one-time thing. Because we're in health and fitness, it's a service industry, and you're trying to have content that is consumed, or a subscription, or an ebook, or something where they're going to be intimately familiar with you, and they're letting you into helping them with their health and their fitness. Your name matters, and it's a relationship in an essence, and relationships are built on trust. So if you betray that trust, that customer's gone forever.
Yeah.
And like, people don't call customer service lines to say, hey, great work, thanks, and hang up. They call to complain. So I've seen personal training studios fail, especially in the pre-internet social media boom, because they would do shitty, unethical strategies of just like pressuring people into re-signing. And eventually, when that person finally is willing to have that social discomfort and not sign back up, even though they don't want to be training there anymore, they are so done. They storm out of the office, they flip you off, and they tell every single person they know who lives close to the personal training studio, don't go there. They're a bunch of used car salesmen. They're pretending to be fitness trainers.
Yep.
And you eventually can poison the well. And
Yes.
the analogy here is that your integrity is that well. So if the moral and ethical argument didn't convince you,
Yes.
Not providing value and betraying your own brand message, you're going to have to find a new industry within a couple of years.
Yep.
If you do that.
And we've seen people do a little bit of that pivot where they burn one well, so to speak, and then it's like a parallel well the next town they go over to. But then the next town, they're kind of like, haven't we heard about you? It's like, no, that's not me at all, guys. That wasn't me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
No, I actually really enjoyed that conversation talking about integrity in the industry, because it's one of those considerations that are extremely important. But how do you approach the topic? How do you even begin to talk about it without trying to sound like an asshole that's boosting themselves up? It's like, this is what I try and do. It's like, okay, buddy, right? Get off our own high horse. But I think we approach the topic with honesty. I do like with this podcast, it's to me a 3D exploration, and why just working with you, it made me excited at the idea of providing a certain threshold, a certain level of information, practical information, useful information that makes you, once again, a little bit introspective, where we talk about the philosophy of lifting, why we lift in the first place, the history of lifting. But it's a 3D look at lifting, at the lifting industry, at lifting culture as a whole. And so I think as both of us, I would use the term loosely for me, working professionals, but as working professionals in this industry, it's something that we need to talk about, right?
Well said. Yeah, I totally agree. And there are certainly people more successful than us. There are certainly other people who are more successful, who have maintained their integrity. But one thing we can say is we've both been around for a decade. Yeah. And we're doing better than we were. And we're still in alignment with our mission statements. So I think, man, again, like you said, I'm not trying to be self-serving, but I look back on what I've done and be like, this is good.
Yes.
And if there's something to be learned there that I can, if it can be altruistic, that I can help others with, then awesome. So hopefully this was helpful to anyone who is trying to make a difference.
Well, on that note, I think we are going to close this episode. This is the first official, unless you count the introduction, but the introduction was the introduction. Come on, guys. The first solo episode of Iron Culture. We plan on throwing some of these every now and then, and we're going to categorize every single episode so you guys know who's on it, what the subject's about. Maybe we'll come up with a special name for these solo episodes so you guys know to distinguish them a little bit. I do like the idea, Eric, of visiting back the war stories in particular. Like maybe we get some of your boys, my boy Alberto Nunez, maybe Jeff Albert, just sharing some like prep stories, like the life of a bodybuilder. It's almost like, A&E, how they used to have those documentaries where it's like sharing, it's like someone says something, we'll hype up the podcast, where Jeff's like, I remember dreaming about McDonald's, and then just the noise hits where they make it dramatic. That could be us.
Oh, and we can ask our clients to write in and share stuff too, man, because we're not going to share it on their behalf. Some of that stuff's pretty personal, but when you get to a certain point, you can look back at the times that you thought were awful at that time, and look back with humor, and maybe want to share that. So yeah, we could definitely do that. I like that idea.
Definitely. And so for everyone listening, thank you so much for listening to Iron Culture, the podcast. We're back every single week on iTunes, on Spotify, on YouTube. You can help us out. You can be honest with us. If you didn't enjoy this episode, you're on YouTube, you can give it a thumbs down. Okay, we're not going to hate on that. If you did enjoy it, consider leaving a rating, a review, a thumbs up, maybe a comment in the comment section on YouTube or on our Instagram, letting us know what future episodes you would like to see, because I think we both would like to consider Iron Culture a resource for everyone out there to have honest discussions on lifting, on the science of lifting, the history of lifting, lifting culture as a whole, and all these important topics. So we want to bring you the best level of information, so feel free to interact with us. We'll see everyone in that next week's episode.